This is Family Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Connie Ellefson, engineer, author, and professional organizer for the first time. Welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
I wanted to talk to you about your website, and the topic today we're going to talk about is basically um, why is it so hard to stay decluttered and organized, which we just brought up. And this is going to
hmm
be episode 901 of the Family Electric Ghost podcast. So thank you for being on our 901st episode. So
Great. Thank you.
clearthespace.com, maybe you could talk to us about that. What is that website if people go to that?
They'll see some of the other podcasts I've been on, and they'll see some information about me, some reviews about the book I wrote. There's a couple of audios, a couple of YouTube or videos of I got a thing on YouTube, and then I've got a little clip from my audiobook, which came out a couple of months ago. So there's lots of different pieces of information that have mainly to do with the book.
Yeah, for those on the audio podcast, that's www.clearthespace.com. That will be clickable on Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube, and all the other places that we're going to be published. So you'll be able to click through and actually go directly to the website. Want to let people know that we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. If you use coupon code GHOST, you get 1 month free premium subscription. We're going to be on that platform later tonight. So you'll be able to listen to the audio version of this podcast there. So, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, just from the questions you like to answer, is just when you got into this fact about decluttering, like what is decluttering? Maybe you can define what that means.
It's it's going through your belongings, or in the case of my book, I'll explain a little bit later. I don't just cover the possessions, because I realized that there could be emotional clutter in our brains, mind clutter, emotional clutter, and there's also physical body clutter that can slow you down. But when it comes to the possessions, that's what most of us are familiar with. It's anything in your house or office that is not something you use regularly, or maybe even once in 3 years or whatever. You basically never use it, or
Hmm.
you don't love it. If you love something, even if you don't use it, it still adds to your life to have it there. So clutter kind of gets in your way of having your best life because you keep stumbling over it. Either your eyes get caught as you look around the room and you feel sort of depleted, or you're literally stumbling over it. So it just slows you down, basically. That's the simplest way to say it.
So you were saying it's like in a physical sense, and it's also potentially like, maybe like things like the baggage people talk about. Is it in that sense too? Like
Right,
baggage
right.
people carry?
Yes. I realized I grew up moving around many times. My dad had a job in the oil business, and we moved every 6 months to a year. And my first 5 years, we lived in a trailer that was 8 feet wide and 43 feet long.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was 344 square feet for four people. And we never seemed to be that crowded. So I assume we didn't have much stuff. And then when I grew up and had my own family, we started accumulating possessions. And at one point, we moved from one house to another. And it took me and five big guys 4.5 hours to load all of our stuff into a moving van. And then I thought, what happened?
Yeah. What do you
So,
need all that for?
right. But I also would read organizing books, and I would get all excited about how this book is going to be the magic one that changes my life. And I do all the steps and the procedures, and then I would stop at the 90% mark. I would never go all the way. And eventually I realized there's something going on here that's keeping me from completing the project. So, what's that all about? And I realized it could be emotional clutter holding me back. For some reason, it was terrifying to go ahead and finish up the whole thing.
Hmm.
So I just started the whole ball rolling.
Yeah, I guess like there's a lot of stuff. My wife made me go through a process where we had a junk removal place come and take all this stuff, and I was like really trying to hold on to a lot of it.
Uh-huh.
It's like, "Oh, maybe I'm gonna use that. Maybe I'm gonna use that." I'm like, "No, no.
Mhm.
We're gonna get rid of it now."
Right.
And it's, like, hard because there's some stuff is like, yeah, you say, "Oh, yeah, I'm gonna" like, you never touch it, but, like, maybe I'll touch it. Maybe I'll
Right.
I got stuff from my college books from going to school. Do I
Right.
really need those? Now that I'm 55, it's like when I was 20 something, do I really need to have that? Some of it maybe, but yeah, you have to go through things and like, do you have antiques? Do you have collectibles? Do you have stuff that like toys? Like
Mhm.
I was a big thing into toys. I
Uh-huh.
was I was carrying around all these toys that my daughter had from Japan. That we
Mhm.
lived in Japan for a while, and then when we made a decision, well, those are so unique, we can't really get rid of that
Mhm.
because like you're never gonna get that again. So
Right.
like, how do you make those judgments and like in terms of like what is actually? I guess it's a personal decision what you think
Mhm.
is important.
Yes. It's different for every person. You don't know. I had one client that I was trying to help downsize a massive wardrobe, and with every garment that I would look at that I would think, "Oh my goodness, that is so boring and insipid." Like, why I'm sure she's gonna wanna get rid of that. But that would be the one shirt or whatever that she really loved, and she'd say, "Oh, that's really pretty," and she'd wanna keep that one. So, I'm just like, I can't I can't
Yeah.
judge what anybody else considers worth keeping, and there's so you kind of have to figure out your own story or what inspires you, what
Hmm.
really gets you going on the idea of actually letting go of the stuff. So in my book, I mentioned like 10 or so different things that could inspire people from you're just a really kind person, so you'd like to pass along your belongings that you're not using to someone that could actually use them. So for some people that inspires them. They're going to donate it to a thrift store or something, or give it away to somebody that may not have as much. That really inspires them. But it's different for everyone. So you might think with your collectible toys, maybe you could go ahead and sell them and use them to take a nice trip with your family. So it's kind of an inspiration, and it's just unique for each person. I Some people, like, you could say this is just an exercise. Say the flood was coming to your house in an hour. So you don't
Oh.
have to leave right this minute. You got an hour and you've got some help. People can help you take out what you really value. If you look around at your belongings, what would you take and what would you leave behind? So
Hmm.
that's a really big clue to what you actually value
Yeah,
the
that's a good
most.
test
Yeah.
because yeah, I think there's like an emotional connection.
Mhm.
I have an emotional connection to like some of the stuff I have, with my for my daughter, in
Mhm.
Japan. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it was like that was such a unique thing. She was in preschool and kindergarten in Japan, and she
Mhm.
got all these toys that you really can't get anywhere else.
Right.
And we're like, that to me is like I've always said, we're not touching that.
Mhm.
Other things can go, but that's staying because it's just something I just, I think that her kids might want it,
Uh-huh.
even if she doesn't think it's important. But
Right.
yeah, it's like well, you never know what so you could look at something and somebody actually has a story that's
Right.
tied to that dress or tied to
Exactly.
that object. And when you look at it, you can't see that unless they
Right.
tell you.
Yeah. So that's why sometimes it helps to have assistance with when you're trying to downsize. If you have a professional organizer that you've hired or a friend that isn't a family member, somebody that won't be as judgmental,
Hmm.
then you can tell the stories about the belongings. And then if somebody listens, empathically, they listen carefully, and you don't feel silly about it, then sometimes it's easier to let go
Hmm.
if you have someone you can tell your story to. And
Yeah.
then you also most people will recommend starting with the easy things, the things you don't really care about that much. And then as you
Hmm.
go, you start decluttering and you start feeling that delicious rush. That's the other part of my title. Clear the space, feel the rush. And that's endorphins in flowing through your body when you feel lighter, feel happier, you feel the relief of the release of that stuff going out
Oh,
of
so
your
that's what
life.
that
And
means. The
yeah,
rush is like when you let it go. It's kind of
yeah.
like now I deal with a lot of like therapists and life
Mhm.
coaches that talk about like letting go.
Yeah.
And I think some people are using the material things that are tied to like emotional things, and they're not letting go of
Hmm.
those moments,
Right.
and they just don't. Some people don't want to clear that out.
Right.
They want to hold it for his, and maybe they
Mhm.
shouldn't be holding it because it's tying them down. It's keeping
Right.
them like in a box. Is that
Right.
that part of the idea? Is like if
Uh-huh.
you don't let some of this stuff go, how are you going to move forward?
Right. Exactly. I saw a line that said that exact same thing the other day. Very simply, if you want to go somewhere, you have to leave. I
Yeah.
thought, whoa, that says it all. But the thing is to be kind to yourself and be gentle, because as you get started with the stuff that you don't care about that much, and you start to feel the relief that comes when that stuff is out of your sight and out of your way, then it gets easier and easier to let go of the stuff that you do have a more of an emotional tie to, because you've already figured out how good it feels, and you can compare that. One of the things I have in my book is to calculate how much per square foot your house costs you, or your office, or your apartment, or whatever, dollars per square foot per month. Like if you have a 2,000 square foot house and it costs you 2,000 a month, then that's a
Mhm.
dollar per square foot, so per month. So if you're spending 100 square feet around your house with maybe a dresser that's holding a bunch of junk you don't use anymore, or just boxes stacked around, that's costing you $100 a month. So
Mm.
it's $1,200 a year. Then you can ask yourself, is it worth $1,200 at all? Is it worth $100? So just another way to motivate yourself.
So how do you keep from when you clear the space? How do you keep from cluttering it up again?
Well, that's the thing I realized recently, is time is the fourth dimension in organizing, because you are not going to stop receiving gifts for your birthday or whatever. You're probably not going to stop shopping ever again. So that stuff is going to accumulate a little bit. It's a little bit just the way it did in the first place, a little bit at a time. It's going to build up again, unless you're pretty firm about how I don't have room for this, or you just make it a habit every 6 months or something to go through another purge and get rid of the things that have now become obsolete. And I don't think people, they think that the system of this is how I declutter and organize, and that's going to be my permanent system. No,
Yeah.
we're very mobile, active people. Even if we're not doing much, we're still, like, I had an experience that really brought it home to me. A couple of years ago, I was in another town and I was staying at an Airbnb, and had a nice little room with a great closet and a great dresser. So all my clothes were tucked away. And I was actually working on the end of my book. So I had my laptop with me and a little book bag and some, the papers of my manuscript. And every night I just work late and I go to bed. I wouldn't put everything away. But in the morning, even with just those few things, the book bag, the computer, the papers, it would still take me 10 minutes to get it all put away, back
Mhm.
together. I'm like, if it takes that long with like five items, you know, what are we doing with, like, I've heard that the average American family may have 100,000 items in their home. So you can really see why cutting your inventory way down would make it a lot easier to keep it maintained. But you
Yeah.
do have
Yeah.
to you do have to have a system for keeping it maintained, where so it doesn't get out of hand again, which it can very easily do.
Yeah. Because I'm a musician, so part of our thing is like we like to collect instruments,
Uh-huh.
and over time we get a lot of instruments, and as a working musician, we use those for different things. So I tend to like I'm not getting rid of any of that stuff because a lot of times with music is like you go back to the older stuff.
Uh-huh.
It's like you like that stuff's kind of classic, and so
Mhm.
and so it's hard when you're with musicians or if you ever seen guitarists, they might have 10, 15, 20 guitars, 30, and the more the better they are, the more they have. Um, and they just musicians are kind of notorious for keeping all that stuff because it is part of the art. And then
Yeah.
you can get to a big argument like, well, get rid of this one. But I do use it. Like, well, how often? Maybe once a year,
Yeah.
once every 2 years. So you have to make, it's hard when you get people who are hard headed, they're like, well, I don't want to get rid of that.
Right. Yeah, you just have to figure out a nice way to store it that isn't helter skelter all over the place. And then you can keep as much stuff as you want if you have a good place to organize it, keep it organized and put away so that it's I think the main thing is so it's very easy to put away. You don't have
Hmm.
to move anything else out of the way to put it away. And you may go through your whole house and get rid of a bunch of stuff, and then you organize what's left, and then after a few weeks or so, you go, still not simple enough.
Hmm.
It's still not easy enough to put everything away without having to move other stuff out of the way. So because you're not going to do it if it's at all hard.
Well, I think the clue also is like if you're always using stuff, like if you
Mhm.
see here, this is my studio with all my scents. It's in my
Uh-huh.
bedroom, and I use it. I
Right.
use it all the time. So if
Yeah.
you're actively using stuff, well, that's not stuff you're going to declutter.
No,
Like if you're,
that's
yeah,
not clutter at all.
yeah. So, but it's when you have like a big pile of CDs because nobody listens to CDs anymore because it's all
Right.
MP3 and WAV file. Do you really need to keep those?
Right.
you know you
Mhm.
could probably give those away, and then what, maybe there's emotional value to when you bought that. Oh,
Uh-huh.
I bought that, in 1990, and I was with this person, and I remember that moment or whatever, and so
Uh-huh.
that can kind of keep you from getting rid of it because of the moment that it happened, right?
Exactly.
So then you have to make those judgments of, like, is that moment worth paying that money for that space? Like, you get the calculation of
Mhm.
paying for that space, and you've got all this stuff, like, how much you wanna pay for those moments.
Right. Well, one of my favorite organizers is I'll think of his name in a minute. He's Australian, Peter Walsh, very famous. So he says, take you have 5 CDs and pick out your 2 favorites or your 3 favorites. And then the ones that are not your favorite, they're a lot easier to let go of when you see your favorites on one side and your less favorites on the other. And that way you can gradually kind of narrow it down. And then one day you'll just say, okay, I'm done with that. Or you can write it down somewhere so you remember the name of the album. So it's not, gone forever. You know that the memory is still somewhere that you could find it again.
Now, your book, I guess it has 3 sections. Do you have to read it in order, or can you go right to the part that you're interested in?
Yes, exactly. You can just read the part that you like. There's an introduction, a first chapter, and a last chapter. And I would recommend reading those for sure. But the 3 sections in the middle are about the mind, the body, and stuff. So in that case, you can only go to the section you want. You don't have to read the whole thing. They're kind of each one is sort of independent, so
Mhm.
they could be read without knowing the other part.
That's interesting, because like, there's, like, a, like, holistic thinking, you might wanna, like, get the whole picture, but then if you're
Right.
kinda like people are so pressed for time today. We're living in,
Exactly.
like, the TikTok real, short attention span.
Uh-huh.
As musicians, we have to deal with that. People only wanna listen to 2 minutes. They used to listen to 4 or 5 minutes. And
Right. Yeah.
so then we have to figure out how do we actually grab people, and I guess when you're an author, you have to think about that too. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, you only have so much time that you can get engage somebody. It's like the first 15 seconds of a
Mhm.
song engages somebody. So when you're an author, how do you deal with that?
You just have to realize that everybody's gonna read it a little bit different, and if especially if that's what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to let people know you don't have to read the whole thing. If you
Mhm.
don't have time or, just only this part is interesting you right now. Some people won't even pick up a book if they feel like, you know,
Gotta read the whole thing.
they're
Yeah.
obligated to read the whole thing, but if they can just go to what's interesting to them now, they may then find that they'd like to read the other 2 sections or work on that part for a while and then add some more. To me, the emotional part is probably the mind clutter is the biggest
Mhm.
thing in the way for most of us, so that's that's why I put that section first, but
Yeah, that's the
that's
heavy
where the
lift, but that's probably gonna solve the problem. And like with anything, like a lot of things are what's in the head.
Yes.
And if you don't deal with what's there, then you never solve it. And I think that's interesting. They have to have declutter one area or another, but it seems like if you can't have your mind's kind of cluttered,
Mhm.
And your life might be cluttered because you're not organizing your thoughts in a maybe a lot. Not everybody can be logical,
Right.
but there could be things that just don't make sense. Like, why are you doing it? And so you kind of have to think of like, is there any kind of rhyme or reason to why you're doing something?
Well, one of the points I like to make is all these clutter areas are interconnected. And I was actually on another podcast where the moderator just went right into my hands. She said, "Yes, I after I work out, I'm all energized and relaxed, and I it's much easier for me to go to the junk drawer or whatever and start sorting it out
Mhm.
because you've basically decluttered your body a little bit when you do some exercise and you're already feeling good. So then you're ready to tackle a little bit more of it. That's why even if you just start in one place, those other places are going to start improving too. The mind
Yeah, so
clutter
it's
and
probably
the physical body clutter, they'll all improve. Even
yeah,
if
it's
you
probably
just
not to be good in a really if you're suffering from anxiety or having a lot, that's probably not the best moment to do the decluttering.
right.
Um, you probably, like you said, if you like meditate or you go for a walk or you go
Uh-huh.
for a run or you jog, then you clear your head out. And it's kind of
Exactly.
like, when we're musicians, like if we overthink it, like we run into a situation where people use the logic side instead of like the art side. And
Right.
so if you're writing songs and you just keep on starting and stopping, starting and stopping,
Hmm.
you're not kind of going with the flow, right?
Right.
And a lot of times with art is like if it flows, even if it's not perfect, it tends to be a better representation than if you're trying to make something perfect because you keep on stopping and starting, stop and start, you never
Right.
finish it because you're too anxious about what you're doing. You're not
Right.
kind of trusting yourself
Uh-huh.
to actually get
Exactly.
it done.
Right. I've heard that's a good way to write as well is look over your notes that you've made and then just start writing. And
Yeah.
when you get to a point where you don't know what the next phrase or word is going to be, you just put a blank and keep going. And I'm sure it's the
Yeah,
same way with writing music.
I've talked to some authors and some, a lot of creators that have
Mhm.
said it's kind of like stream of consciousness style. They
Uh-huh.
kind of we just kind of just let it. I sometimes just put my multi-track and just record
Uh-huh.
and not really know what I was going to do.
Uh-huh.
And as I got older, when I was younger, I used to try to go and write the bars on a sheet and be really, and then I end up like spending all this time trying to organize it. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't like it. I don't like it. It doesn't sound like heartfelt. That
Uh-huh.
when I actually like trusted myself and actually just went with a stream of consciousness and went back to it, a lot
Mhm.
of that stuff I didn't even expect that I would do it. And
Yeah.
it was better than what I was trying to plan.
Wow.
And I've heard authors say sometimes when they do that, when they just do a free flow and they had all these ideas and they still outline, but
Mhm.
if they get some things that they didn't expect, it's kind of
Right.
like magical stuff that you kind of trust your instincts as an artist and you kind of go with it.
Uh-huh. Exactly. That's a wonderful illustration.
So one thing, do you have to completely declutter one area to actually start on other areas, or you can kind of partially do things?
Right. Yeah, it's pretty overwhelming for somebody, especially one that lives in America, to decide you're going to do the whole house. But if somebody, one of the things I recommend is if you're doing a closet or a drawer or something, is take everything out. It would be hard to take everything out of a room, but you can do it out of one area.
Mhm.
Then you can look at each thing and you can decide, well, I really do love it or use it. You might end up putting almost everything back, but just the fact that you've moved it out gets the energy flowing again. And
Mm.
it also reminds you that of what you have because lots of times we just forget what we already have.
Yeah, it
But
kind of ends up being that process where you said you get the rush. Is part of that rush when you discover something
uh-huh,
because you hadn't been looking at stuff, you discover things.
right, you could be.
And
Yes, we're very we're very it's part of like the caveman neurophysiology that we're always looking for danger. So danger is usually something new. So we learn to just tune out all the stuff that's already there because it's safe. We already know it's not going to attack us. So we tend to look at the new stuff and start ignoring the old.
mm,
And then if you clean out the closet and you discover something you'd forgotten you had that's pretty fun, that's that's great. It's like going shopping without having to spend any money.
Yeah, can you find stuff is like, "Oh, wow, I have this old 8-track player and I didn't know I had it," you know?
Right.
Right, I've got this original vinyl and I didn't know I had it,
Uh-huh.
I got this 1970s Hawaiian shirt, and then I look it up and like, "Oh, that's actually worth money."
Yeah.
It's like you start
Great.
finding it's like, "Oh, wow." Like, does it come into play that you start to look at how where do you put these things? You had mentioned, giving it to charities, giving it to Salvation Army, but
Uh-huh.
do you go online and try to get rid of it?
You could. It's if you like to do that kind of thing. There are people you can find that will sell stuff for you online and they'll take like a 35% cut of it, but
Mhm.
then you don't have to do all the descriptions and the photos and
Oh,
figuring out how to do the software and stuff like that. So there are people that will do that for you. I recently worked with a company on someone who had passed away, and her sister lived far away, so she was trying to get the house ready to sell. And this particular company would sell everything in the house, including half open bottles of shampoo and cleaning
wow,
stuff. They would
everything.
just put things in big lots of somewhat similar things, and the people that would bid on it would bid at least $1, but it could go much higher if the thing was very valuable, or even if it was not, it was just something somebody really wants bad. So then the company takes a cut, and they do they have the software, but it's a great way to completely get the house empty
Wow, I
because
didn't even know they had that. Well, you
yeah,
never know, like, there's a lot of cool things today where, yeah,
uh-huh,
you'd be surprised that because because, "Oh, I gotta do a tag sale." Well, that doesn't usually work. My
right,
experience with tag sales is, like, I put everything out there, and I sell, like, 5% of what I put out, and then you end up
right.
still having everything I had. And I'm like,
Yeah,
"Well."
so so this is when the people come, when they bid on stuff, they know that they have to take everything in the lot. They can't just pick out the best stuff and leave the
Yeah.
rest, otherwise they won't be able to bid the next time.
Yeah, that's what happens
So,
with the tag sale. People just
yeah,
take the best stuff and leave you with like, "Oh, I don't know, I guess I gotta trash it." But,
right,
it's cool to, realize that maybe you don't have to trash it from what you just said. Somebody could take everything, which
right,
is really cool,
mhm,
because that's, like, something people are mindful of, like, "Well, I don't want all this going in the dump."
right,
Maybe somebody actually wants it.
yeah, and I'm sure that a lot of the stuff did get thrown away or it got donated or whatever, but at least it's more spread out, it's not just this whole
Yeah.
load of stuff that's going to the dump all at once.
Yeah, yeah, at least you're trying to, because the people you'd be surprised what people want.
Oh, yeah,
People you might get rid of more of it than you ever anticipated
right.
versus like most of it going into the trash. Um, so like you were talking about like what was the big pivotal moment that made you want to get into this topic? Like what was the thing that made you feel like you needed to do this?
The 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 organizing or the book itself?
Well, maybe maybe start with the book or start with the organizer. Which came
Okay,
first?
the organizing. I'm I'm also a civil engineer. That's been my profession since college. And there was a time about, well, actually 2008, but in the years following 9/11, I was laid off 4 times in 6 years. And finally, after the 4th one, I thought, I might need a new career.
Mhm.
So I remembered that I much more enjoyed organizing my desk and putting everything away and all that jazz than the work. So I thought I'd try professional organizing. Unfortunately, everybody else was kind of hurting for money too in 2008, so it didn't really take off, and eventually I got more engineering work. So I kind of do both now. But the book was this is actually my fourth book. So the others were about one was about baby names from different countries, and then I had two about low water landscaping. But I just thought it would be a great idea to have another book that wouldn't just cover your stuff, because we see the stuff and it feels like it's the problem, but it's probably the tip of the iceberg,
Mhm.
and the emotional part is the part that's below the water surface. So I thought it would be great to have a rounded book, not just, as you said, a holistic one that would cover the whole person, not just the stuff.
Yes, it seems like the holistic nature of what your book is maybe the difference between other kind of decluttering concept ideas, because you're thinking about like the concept that I've talked to a lot of therapists and life coaches is like this kind of pyramid or the mind, body, soul,
Uh-huh.
and
Oh,
if you usually take one leg of something, it doesn't, that doesn't do it. Like if you
right.
only handle the body and you don't
Uh-huh.
deal with the mind and
Uh-huh.
you don't deal with the soul or the spirit or the heart, then it usually doesn't isn't successful because you like left out like what makes you like a human being. It's
Exactly.
not just one part of you, like why something's not working. It's usually because things are, like you said, interconnected earlier. There's a lot
Mhm.
of interconnectedness that people want to just separate and say, well, let's separate this from that. But like, wait, can you really separate it?
Well, a big difference is, especially if you live with other people, nobody's gonna be exactly the same at how much clutter they can deal with, or and, some people don't even see it. They just, like, they're focused on whatever their stuff, and so then one person is being extremely bugged by it, and the other one doesn't even notice it. So you
Hmm.
have to you have to compromise and figure out something that works for everybody. So my book is mainly about the motivations to do this different things, because especially on the organizing your stuff, there's hundreds of other books that have already covered the subject very well. So I didn't want to just recreate another organizing book. And my book is mostly about decluttering, because to me that's the hardest part for people to do, that is letting go. Once you get it downsized to the stuff that you really love and use, then the organizing part is a lot easier.
Well, I think it starts to get you into maybe a healthier space with
Uh-huh.
that kind of mind body. Because if
Right.
you're cluttering up your life with a lot of stuff, it's that kind of emotional baggage, it's the physical baggage. It's like it taking up the space. Like, how are
Mhm.
you living in that space? Maybe you don't see it, but other people see it. And it's like
Right.
you kind of got the tunnel vision. Usually when you're in the middle of something, like, you don't actually see what the issue is until somebody kind of shows you because you're kind of stuck in your mindset. And
Right.
if you're stuck in your mindset, you don't see it. Like, when we're musicians, we get stuck on something for 6 months working on a track and we like, oh, this is it. And then you give it to somebody and they're like, oh, what about this? What about that? And you're like, oh. You were like stuck or so focused that you got to actually get that outside influence. You got to like you get outside your comfort zone. It seems like
Uh-huh.
to me.
Yeah.
Um, in order to be successful, you have to know where you're not working.
Right.
Because if you're perfect, how can you move forward? You usually have to fix something.
Right. Yeah, we like puzzles. That's what humans like. We like challenges. So we're always going to be messing around with it, making it a little bit better.
That
But
that's interesting. A different approach to life to think about the clutter, like on different levels.
mhm.
Because a lot of times is you get like all these things as an artist. We can have like archives of
Yeah,
tons of tapes,
right.
and we're like, well, which one should I be using? Where should I be? And it's kind of like the way you think about it is like, well, where's your head at? Where's your heart today? You know,
Hmm.
it's like what speaks to you like in the moment that you're working on something and then you kind of pull from it. I think it's like when you're an author, you're pulling
Uh-huh.
from different places, right? And
Right.
maybe things aren't sequential. Because
Right.
last time some people like a point in time they're bouncing around.
Uh-huh.
Is everything kind of A to B, or are you bouncing all over the timeline?
Well, I like to have people, if I'm working with clients, I ask them, how would you like to spend your time, and how do you want to spend your life? How do you want to spend your time in your space? For me, my ideal, and I still don't have my house quite all the way there, but my ideal is a vacation condo. It's nicely decorated. There's room to do your, vacation adventures, but there's no clutter.
Mm.
So, how do you feel when you go into a vacation condo? Does it feel too sparse, or like, oh, this doesn't feel homey enough, or does it actually feel really nice?
Mm.
And if it does, then that's something you could try in your life at home to work towards and see, even if you just get one room the way you want it, the difference between going from that room to the rest of the house, how does it make you feel?
That's interesting because, like, if you go on vacation, I always go to Maine and
Uh-huh.
go to these, like, condos that you can rent out, and it is not like home, it is decluttered. It doesn't have all the stuff that home has, and you could be like a homebody, like, "Why I like that stuff?"
Mhm.
That stuff makes me feel comfortable because you're
Right,
not maybe ready to declutter.
right.
It's just, like, that stuff makes you feel good,
Uh-huh.
and if it's not
Exactly.
there, then you don't feel good, but if you could be the person, "Well, that stuff's dragging me down, it's making me feel bad,
Right.
and I'm going away from it on vacation to get away from it." It's like, which level are you at? Because it's probably a little bit of both, you know?
Uh-huh. Well, if you didn't have time to tidy things up before you left and you come back from your vacation and you see your house a mess and you think, "Dang, I don't wanna keep doing this." So that might inspire you too. Whatever works. It might be something different at different times. One of the things that I figured out from 2 or 3 things that happened towards the end of writing my book, which took a very long time, because I just did it independently this time before I was with regular publishers, so I didn't have a deadline, but I was also very, very
Mhm,
busy with engineering. But towards the end of the book, I read one by Dr. Joe Dispenza called Becoming Supernatural. It's about all the things people can do that they don't know they can do. They're much stronger and more creative and so forth than they think they are. It's not about paranormal. It's just like all the stuff
mhm,
we can do. And he said he had a conference in 2016 with about 120 people, and they agreed to a informal experiment where they would get tested for uh, it's called immunoglobulin A. It's a protein in your body that says this is how strong your immune system is right now. And then he asked them to spend 10 minutes 3 times a day putting themselves in a happy state, like love, gratitude, happiness, just like kind of a 10-minute meditation 3 times a day. So basically they were being happy 30 minutes a day. And they probably were happy to be at the conference too. They probably enjoyed it. So it was probably more than 30 minutes. But anyway, at the end of the time, they were tested again for this immunoglobulin A, and it had gone up an average of 50%. And he said, this is way
wow,
stronger than any flu shot or vitamin C or whatever that people, and it's all within your own body. And all of a sudden, I just put that together with the rush. I think what these people were feeling was endorphins. That's
mhm,
that's like the neurotransmitter that makes you feel happy, or it's kind of a painkiller too. If you eat some hot food or spicy food, your brain thinks you're getting burned, so it releases endorphins to help kill the pain, which isn't really there, but you feel really good. So those are all connected. So from that, I went, it
wow.
seems to me like decluttering or getting to where you feel really good in your home space or wherever you are could be good for your immune system. So I made that big leap.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense because, like, I'm a Buddhist and we do meditation,
Mhm.
and we try to, like, breath control and basically, like, kind of like a Tai Chi type of thing. But basically, when you
Right.
go and you do meditation and you chant or you try to get focus and
Mhm.
you do breathing exercises, it kind of, clears your mind.
Yes.
And then when you're a musician, when you kinda get in that zone, like, if you ever see musicians, like jazz musicians, and they're playing, like, we get it makes you happy. Musicians,
Mhm.
a lot of times we do the work even whether we get paid or not,
Oh,
just
yeah.
because actually doing the music is kinda like, an athlete doing exercise or playing sports is like it's like a team thing. And
Right.
there's, like, this nonverbal communication that happens with a group
Uh-huh.
of musicians, and it's hard to describe it. It's like when you're working together on a sports team and you win that goal, you win, that match. It's
Yes.
like it feels like that, and
Uh-huh.
I think a lot of us, the wow, like I want to keep that kind of that feeling because
Mhm.
it makes you feel like better. And I bet if you
Right.
tested musicians after they came off a stage playing, they would probably may test the same way.
Yeah, exactly. I bet they would. Well, I also realized I had a yoga class right about the same time as I was finishing all this up, and I was lying under I was lying on the ground. We are doing the last pose of yoga, the shavasana pose, It's where you lie down on your back and relax everything. And we were outside because it was during the pandemic. We are looking up into the trees. And the instructor had this soothing voice and she was playing some soothing music. And I was just like, oh, I feel so good. And then, and then all of a sudden I just stopped short and I said, wait a minute. It's not the music or the instructor or the leaves or lying down. It's me. I'm the one that released the endorphins. So you can you can turn it on anytime. You don't need to.
Yeah,
You don't,
yeah. I mean, you can kind of you're when you're in the meditation, it's like you can be by yourself.
right. You can
It's
let
just like when
yourself be happy.
yeah, it was just when you're in those other kind of group activities, like being athlete or being
Hmm.
a musician, you have this connection that's kind of like this nonverbal connection where you're playing, and
Yeah.
you get that's a different type of thing where it's a group kind of
Hmm.
behavior,
Yep.
but each individual person kind of gets into that zone.
Right.
But there's a connectedness,
Hmm.
and that's where it's a little different. But, I think it's just interesting the way the mind can declutter. Like, when I get into the zone playing my instrument, I'm not really thinking about the what I gotta do at work,
Right. Uh-huh.
and part of what, we do as musicians is like, yeah, I got a day job. I'm an IT guy. I'm a designer.
Uh-huh.
But every day I like to practice on my piano or something because it kind of gets me out of that logical state. It
Okay.
gets me into this state where I don't have to think about it. You start playing piano, you're not thinking about it. You're just playing it, and it's a cool thing, kind of like meditation in a way
Hmm.
because it gets you not to think about your troubles.
Right.
You kind of just think about the music,
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah, I'm a
yeah,
musician too, but so I know what you're talking about. But now you're inspiring me. I haven't played. I have a synthesizer. I haven't played it for years. So now I'm going to go do it because you said that.
it's a cool thing, and, like, whether or not you're gonna make a hit or not, it's just the act of connecting to it. Like, I've got Moogs and Rolands and
Hmm.
Yamahas and all those things, but, it's kinda like, "Oh, well, some people get disinterested because they didn't make it big," and the way
Yeah.
I look at it, I just keep on working on it, and then things happen because I'm
Right.
not scared to put it out there. I
Uh-huh.
started pushing my work out whether or not it was gonna be known, and then I got people all over the world listening to it at a small level, and but it's like if it stays in your head,
Hmm.
no one ever hears it. It's like somebody that sings in the shower,
Right.
then they suddenly decide to go to karaoke night or go to a talent show, and they went, "Wow, you actually have a good voice, but you didn't believe in it."
Uh-huh.
You have to kinda show people, you know? So I think you have to kinda take that thought of maybe I should declutter. So what's like the first step? Like if it's in your head, but then you don't know what to do, it's like your book would help them figure out
Right.
what that first step is.
Right. Yeah. Well, as I mentioned earlier, the first step is what's your dream for your space?
Mhm.
And you can you can do all the techniques you want, but if you have something like that, like I want my house to look like a vacation condo, that's a lot more powerful than just I need to get rid of half my stuff or whatever, which
Mhm.
getting rid of half your stuff is a very good goal. But because because then it's a lot easier to move around in your space and put things away and so forth. But it's just whatever inspires you. It's good to figure out what that inspiration is. Maybe you just want to have a cozy home for your family and place to for everybody to play games together, or maybe you want the sparsest, most minimalist house that you can get, so that you can spend all your time out on crazy adventures and not worry about what's happening at home. Or maybe you'd like to
Yeah.
entertain a lot more and you don't want to have to worry about when people come over that it's going to take 3 days to get the house where you can bear to have people come over. Just whatever inspires you, something simple. And it's usually better to come up with an idea like that than try to put pictures up. You can put pictures of some beautifully decorated space, but it's not going to be your house. So it's better to come up with an idea that really galvanizes your intention and gets you very inspired.
Are you a fan of like doing like a top 5 list or a diary or some kind of documentation of
Oh,
this? 'Cause like you can say it, but like maybe like I've been around people say, well, you need to verbalize or you need to actually create it, put it down in a
mhm,
diary or a journal because if you don't, it would just kind of be vapor. It goes away.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's great to put things down, and I actually do. For several years, I've done a thing where I write down 5 things every day that I'm grateful for, and they could be little tiny things. I try to make them different every day, not just the same old stuff. And then
Hmm.
I write down 5 things that I call it props. Like, you're just acknowledging yourself for getting something done. And
That's a good thing.
that could also be very small because what lots of good things happen to most of us every day, and we do lots of good things. We just don't
Keep track
recognize
of
it
it.
because
Yeah.
we have already mastered the skill a long time ago, so it seems very commonplace. But even just paying the bills or cleaning something, like, it takes a lot of skill to do that. And if you keep track of that every day, and especially the gratitude part, then you see that your life is actually kind of cool. And you tend to forget those wonderful little things that happen every day. So it's wonderful to have a list of you can just kind of glance back through, and even if you achieve some big goal, you tend to forget about it a few days later. So,
Yeah, I think a lot of people think about the bad things.
oh
The bad,
yeah.
they're quantizing all the bad things
Mhm.
and not actually acknowledging like the good points of
Right.
where my wife reminds me of this all the time. It's like you've been able to do it, but all you're thinking about is what you can't do.
Right.
You got to think about like what did you do?
Yeah.
You're able to do these A, B, C, D,
Yeah.
and you're upset about F because you didn't get to that. That's the one you keep on going on and on about F. But
Mhm.
it's like, what about these other things you actually did do?
Right. I started keeping track one day. I called it my to-done list instead of my to-do. And by the time it was 1 o'clock, I already had 12 things on my list. And by the end of the day, I had like 20, 25. And like I said, I'm giving myself credit for things that I've known how to do for a long time, but they still take a lot of skill, and
Yeah, I think it's a good thing.
they have to get done. After you do it for 2 or 3 days, you go, "Man, I'm an expert."
I think people beat themselves up too much.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think a lot of times people don't even start something. Like even
Right.
like with podcasts, right? I've been
Mhm.
doing it like 900 episodes. There are guys that will do it for like 12 and then stop, or 5
Yeah.
and stop
Right.
because they didn't get immediate success.
Yes.
Like the whole thing with this idea was initially I didn't know what I was doing. I just did it because I liked it. And
Uh-huh.
then I started like, oh, I could do this. I could do this. I could find these things. And I started refining. It's kind of like if you show up, people show up.
That's a huge achievement to do that so many years in a row and so many podcasts in a row.
Well, I think
So
it's just dedication. Like if it is like a musician, like you get
uh-huh.
to give up when you're 17
Right.
because you didn't get to be like the Monkees or the
Right.
Beatles,
Uh-huh.
or you can keep on going because you like it, right?
Right.
And then things happen because oh, you're a keyboard player and people know you, and then suddenly
Mhm.
people ask you to work with you. But if you say, ah, well, I didn't get to be John Paul Jones, so I'm going to give up.
Right.
Well, like not everybody's going to be John Paul Jones. Not everybody can be Elton John. It's like so, like if you just like are able to love what you can do,
Mhm.
a lot of people compare themselves to so many other people, and then they don't appreciate what they can do.
Right.
I think that's what it stops a lot of people from doing stuff. I've seen so many musicians and artists stop themselves because they didn't hit this goal.
Right.
And I'm like, well, your stuff's still good, but you don't believe in yourself.
Right.
So if you don't believe in yourself, nobody's going to believe in you.
Right.
you know,
Exactly.
so it's like
Well,
you got to get out of that mindset.
uh-huh. That's one of the hardest things for humans to do. So a large part of what I do is encouraging people to give yourself credit for what you've already done, for all that you can do, and enjoy each day. Since my books came out has come out, I've realized one of my biggest dreams, which is to spend a lot more of my time making videos. I started college
Mm.
as an art major, but then I didn't know how I'd make a living, so I switched to engineering, and it's been a valuable career, but I missed art so much, and I love photography and videos, so now I'm making TikToks.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
it
But there's no
was
gateway, and there are all these gatekeepers before. Part being a
yeah,
musician, like we got all these
uh-huh,
gatekeepers we couldn't even get in, and now because TikTok and Reels and Shorts and SoundClouds
mhm,
and all these places, you can
yeah,
actually get out there where people was like, well, yeah, you had to go in front of the A&R and the marketing team, and like if they didn't like you,
uh-huh,
you didn't get it, right? But now you can go and do these things, and people can find you
right,
uh, and you find audiences you wouldn't believe.
Mhm.
the people that actually watch your reel or watch your short or
Mhm.
watch your podcast. And it's interesting because it's wide open and there's a lot of content,
Mhm.
but you can find a niche just by being uniquely yourself.
Right.
That's what I found is like if you are able to, not try to clone it. We're in a society where we like to clone everything,
Mhm.
but what people actually like is originality. And if you can be true to yourself, you'll find you'll get that audience
Mhm.
because you're authentic. I think
Yes.
people are looking for something that's authentic. Like with your book, you wanted to have an authentic voice, something new, and
Right.
you saw there was all these other things out there,
Uh-huh.
and you came at it with a different point of view.
Mhm. Well, it's been tremendously helpful for me because it's so terrifying when you start. And then but then the more you do it and the big thing about TikTok is, okay, you didn't do it the best you could. There's things you wish you'd, done differently. Make another one. Go
Yeah,
on
you
to
just
the
keep on
next
doing
day.
it. Just
And so
keep on doing
you
it.
have to you get really good at saying, "That's okay. I didn't do the very best, but I tried and I did something." So,
Yeah, I think that's the whole world with these podcasts is, we give people voices
mhm,
that before you had to go on TV, you had to go on a public access, you had to go to NPR, you had to do certain gatekeepers there. You couldn't get out because there's certain people that, how am I going to get on a show?
oh,
And
yeah.
now there's so many avenues for authors, writers, all kinds of people to
Mhm,
get their voices out there and get to hear. Well, that's one of the big loves I have is just getting out, be able to hear other people's stories and the things that other people are doing or are pushing or
mhm,
working on.
right.
And it's interesting to me because you end up being brought around the world talking to all different types of voices,
Mhm,
and everybody's voice is like it's interesting, to
yeah,
not have to hear the same people because they would tell you the industry like they just keep pushing the same top 10, top
right,
20 people. And then that's all there is. The top
right.
10 authors, top 10 actors, top 10 musicians. It's
Uh-huh,
like, but there's all this other stuff
hmm,
that our world of podcasting, we're starting to, explore other people's voices,
right.
not just in the top 20 or top 100. We just talk to everybody.
I was talking to a podcaster in Germany, and he had grown up in Ethiopia and he went to Germany for college to learn how to be a software engineer, and he decided to stay there. And I was telling him about, you keep the stuff that you love and use, or you get rid of the things that you don't love and use. And so he said, so then if you get rid of all that stuff, then you're surrounded by love, right?
Wow.
And I said, oh my gosh, that's very profound.
Yeah, that really is interesting. See, that's the thing where you never know what people are gonna say. That's why I
Mhm.
like the live podcast format.
Yeah.
Is like, you get a scripted format, that's fine. It
Mhm.
looks professional.
Right.
It's perfect. But I'm kind of a guy that I like the old style recordings of the 70s and the 50s. They
Uh-huh.
had accidents, happy accidents or errors, but it's actually authentic. It feels real. Like
Uh-huh.
we can use computers today to make things so perfect, but then it seems to lack a little heart or
Right.
authenticity or
Uh-huh.
honesty. I'd rather hear, somebody that maybe they have a key change is wrong, but the song is perfect, or they didn't use the best microphone, or you could hear their something on their sleeve hitting the mic.
Uh-huh.
There's nothing wrong with that if it was heartfelt and it feels good.
Mhm.
The age of trying to edit out all the mistakes. I
Right.
think that's a problem today. That
Yeah.
people have lost the fact that we're humans,
Right.
and sometimes in art the mistakes are actually part of the art.
Right. Well, the huge message in my book that I put in all the sections is first declutter the guilt or the shame. But that's the thing that holds us back from all this stuff that you're talking about is just feeling like you're not good enough. So whatever anybody can do to promote that is great in my view. That's the biggest declutter of all is just getting rid of I'm not good enough or I made this mistake, so therefore I'm bad or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, to get people that you don't hear their voice, they get stuck in their head because they're not willing to like put their hand up or go up to the mic or get
Mhm.
on TV or get on the internet because they're so scared of what other people think, right?
Mhm.
It's like you got to be. It's hard. There is a lot of fear. I think there's a lot of fear in making that first step.
Right.
Like it's the first step to do anything. People kind of, oh, there's a lot of trepidation. It's like, what should you know? But I think like that's why you go to coaches. That's why you read people books. If you don't know how to do it,
Mhm.
you find somebody that can help you do it.
Exactly. Right.
So you're in that space where you help people. Now, do you actually do mentoring?
I haven't done a lot of it, but it's something I could do
Mm,
easily because a lot of times people, like I said, they just want to have somebody listen to them, and it's 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 always easy to see what they're doing wrong, in my
yeah.
humble opinion. No, it's a everybody seems to like to think about decluttering, and most people would like to be more decluttered. And if it comes, it's like sometimes in your life, you got young children or whatever, and you're just not going to have the time for it. So declutter the guilt about not being decluttered,
Yeah, definitely.
whatever it takes. So I'm all about encouraging people.
Have you ever thought about what I've seen a lot of people do nowadays is like master classes,
Uh-huh.
or creating like courses.
Right.
Have you ever thought to take your book and turn it into like a master class video?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it, and especially I'm trying to figure out a way to emphasize the video part of it. But yeah, anything that I can do that makes it video because it's like my creative outlet, and I've always loved to learn new ways to take a picture or whatever. So it's yeah, it's a great idea.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that because I've been like, okay, I actually should do a master class on how to be like do podcasting
Uh-huh.
since I've been out here doing it. But I just spent so much time doing it that I haven't taken the space to do it. And it's kind of like, yeah, I actually should do that. And I keep on marking it down. I need to set up some kind of master class and create something out there, but I haven't done it because like every day I'm podcasting. So I'm kind of like on the hamster wheel. Like, well, I'm podcasting so much I can't do it. But yeah, I
Maybe
think
when you get to 1,000, you'll take a break or whatever.
yeah, it's like I gotta like turn it off for like a month or two so I can set it up.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of like, well, I don't know if I should turn it off because I'm already on the hamster wheel. I'm
Yeah.
doing.
It's kind of like having a job. So
Yeah, because
yeah.
you kind of once you get on that trend and you start doing it, then you're like, well, how do I stop doing it if because I actually have an audience,
Uh-huh.
and then you're scared like if I stop, am I gonna lose my audience? So you're kind of like, oh, I don't know if I want to do something else,
Well,
but
I bet
maybe
with 900 episodes, you could probably
yeah, I probably
redo
could. I
replay a few of them and just let people know this is from 2019 or whatever, but,
I'm
hope you
taking a
like it.
hiatus. Yeah, well,
Yeah,
TV does that, so
yeah.
I could do that.
I met some guys. My ex-husband and I had a martial arts school, and so we met some people that were famous in the jujitsu world. It was a family of brothers, and they said that every month they would take off 2 or 3 days and just go on a, weekend getaway or something, but every year they would take off an entire month
Oh
and do
wow,
something completely different.
that's a good
And
idea.
and I thought, "Wow." So, a little sabbatical like that, it might
Yeah,
bring
like a
amazing
teacher,
things to
yeah,
your life.
teachers would have time off during the the in between courses,
Uh-huh.
for the semesters, they go off and do, something else.
Right.
Um, it's when you're in your day job, you're like I'm a data guy, doing my day job. It's a 40-hour job. Yeah,
Mhm.
so and I'm doing this on top of it. So, artists, we always, have our day job and then have the gig we like to do.
Right.
But so I'm in that kind of space. But it's been great talking to you, and we want to let people know again to go to your website www.clearthespace.com. Again, that's going to be clickable when this is fully published on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, all these different places that we're at, and we will provide a landing page where people can just go or watch or use whatever tool in podcasting they want to use to actually experience this podcast again.
Uh-huh.
We're on most of the platforms, so they'll be able to check it out everywhere they want to.
Great.
So thank you again for being on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. It was a really cool conversation.
Well, thank you so much. I learned a lot of stuff too. I've got some new ideas.
Well, I'm glad you get to pick up your synth because these are all my synths right here. So, yeah,
Beautiful.
I'm a synth head myself. Okay, have a good
Are we done?